Greetings, exiles, and welcome. My name is Jeezy, and today I wanted to share with you the first currency strategy that I have felt very comfortable about doing, and even better about sharing this league, and that is temple building with the Incursion Scarab of Timelines, which changes the way that you're able to generate temple chronicles. It's a bit involved, so I'll go into it in detail later in the video. Now, while the primary focus of the strategy is to build and generate those temple chronicles, there aren't enough scarabs and there aren't enough passives on the tree to have that be your only focus, as it doesn't scale well with quantity, but what we can do instead is supplement it with mechanics that benefit from all of those extra monsters. To that end, I'm pairing it with Delirium, as all of those extra incursion monsters killed contribute to the Delirium rewards. I'm also tossing in Domination Shrines and Exarch Altars for the same reason. Both of those things contribute meaningfully to the monster density of the map, making it feel more alive, but also to the Delirium rewards we receive when we finish the map. There are 4 things that make up the primary profits from this strategy. Temples which contain a Doriani's Institute, which allows you to double corrupt a gem. Temples which contain a Locus of Corruption, which allows you to double corrupt an item. Temples which contain both of these things, valued slightly higher, but sell slightly slower, as people usually don't need both of these things at the same time. And simulacrums, which you can bulk sell on the currency exchange, no player interaction required for these. Over the course of my 28 maps, I generated 7 temples which contained a Doriani's Institute, 5 temples which contained a Corruption Locus, 2 temples which contained both, and 23 simulacrums. The total costs for Scarabs and Map Device Craft was 4.6 divines, with a profit of almost double that at 9 divines even. I pulled out an average of 1/3 of a divine per map in profit, with a return on investment after all of my maps of 191.3%. I did also include the chaos that I got from directly selling all of my Delirium orbs on the currency exchange within the total profit, just because it's really easy to liquidate stuff like that now. It was difficult to track them because there are like 20 different kinds of Delirium orbs and all of them sell for a different amount, so instead I just tracked the total amount of chaos that I got when selling them. If you were interested in only building temples and not focusing on Delirium at all, here is what the numbers look like when you don't factor in either the Delirium orbs or the simulacrums. Your total expenses and total profit both go down, but the return on investment does go up slightly. Now, depending on the current strength of your build and your goals, it may be a good idea to make this alteration to the strategy, as you'll be able to build temples much faster without getting bogged down by the Delirium, and if your incursions spawn towards the end of a map, it can make them very difficult to actually get through, and you don't want to accidentally lose a temple to dying because the Delirium made it way too hard. I'm going to be breaking down the scarabs that I used into 2 groups. The Incursion Scarab of Timelines is really the only one that matters for building out all of those temples, so I'll cover it a little bit later alongside the Incursion Strategy, as that's a lot to get into. The rest of the scarabs I'm specifically choosing to juice up my Delirium and the rewards from that. Starting off, I'm using 2 Incursion Scarab of Champions. They give a 35% chance each to cause all monsters within your incursions to be at least magic, as well as giving some extra pack size, when combined with the Time Dilation Atlas Tree node, which gives another 33% chance for that same effect. All of the monsters in all of your incursions will be magic. This serves a couple of different purposes. First off, it's just more magic monsters to kill so that we can generate simulacrum splinters and Delirium rewards, but there is a secondary effect as well. When you enter an incursion, you have about 10 seconds before it kicks you out. Every monster you kill gives you a bit of time to this clock. I'm not entirely sure whether magic monsters give more time than normal monsters, but something about either the monster's rarity or just the increased pack size overall does give me plenty of time, usually about 2 minutes as soon as I get into the incursion. And that can be extra nice, especially if you find your incursions very, very late in the map and you're pushing up to the point where you can't kill things quickly. Being able to kill even a single pack of monsters and getting enough time to kind of safety net you into the rest of the incursion will stop you from getting kicked out before you have time to alter the temple. The next scarab that I'm using is the Scarab of Monstrous Lineage. Now, as far as I know, the pack size from this scarab does not increase the incursion monster packs, but as I am spec'd into shrines and rolling domination on the map device, I've picked up the Drawn to Power notable, meaning that shrines are guarded by at least 1 magic monster pack, which do benefit from that, on top of the already naturally spawned monster packs that we have in the map. That means that we actually do benefit quite a bit from this magic pack size. The next one I'm using is the Scarab of Adversaries, which causes some of the rare monsters in your maps to be duplicated, and this is because rare monsters contribute a lot to the amount of simulacrum splinters that are dropped, they contribute to delirium rewards, they also drop a decent bit of gold. Now this scarab is especially good if your build has any sort of built-in percentage health explode for monsters, like Occultist Profane Bloom or Gladiator's Gratuitous Violence, as the maps are so dense that the rare monsters will be totally surrounded by normal and magic monsters most of the time, you might not even really notice them. The strategy for the Delirium itself is pretty simple, but depending on the current strengths of your build, you may have to switch it up a little bit. What I did was I ran Tropical Island, as it's, as far as I know, the longest map in the game, and Delirium gives you a quantity bonus the further into the mist you travel from the mirror. That also makes all of the monsters in the map significantly tankier, like 90% damage reduction tankier, and once you've reached that distance from the mirror, it just stays in effect until you end the Delirium. So it is a bit of a balancing act. If you feel like Tropical Island gives them too much damage reduction too quickly, you can always swap to a shorter map. Another one that I experimented with that treated me pretty nicely was Beach. It's also pretty linear, you're not really going to miss much, but it's much shorter. I usually ran into problems with monsters becoming way too tanky to deal with 3/4 of the way through Tropical Island. So if you find that Tropical Island is too hard and Beach is too easy, there are sources of a stat which causes Delirium Fog to increase faster with distance from the mirror that you can experiment with putting on shorter maps to strike a better balance between difficulty and reward. One source of this is the Descent into Madness node on the Atlas tree, and the other is the Delirium Scarab of Mania, which gives the same stat but also causes the reward meters to fill 100% faster in area, which is a nice little bonus, especially if you're already running a shorter map and you want to try and bring the loot levels up a little bit. So before I get into the Incursion Strategy, let me give you a bit of a primer on the Scarab of Timelines. Now normally when you're building an Incursion temple, Alva will give you 12 chances to change the temple in the past in order to take a temple chronicle from her in the present that contains all of the rooms that you altered and connected. Which means that after 3 or 4 maps, you're only left with one temple and it might not even be that good. But when you're using the Scarab of Timelines, the final incursion you complete in each map will drop you a randomized chronicle consisting of the same layout of rooms and room connections, with all of the room tiers randomized. For sake of argument, let's pretend that this was the temple that I had built after my first map. I have these 4 rooms connected: the Armorer's Workshop, the Sacrificial Chamber, and the Gemcutter's Workshop. They will remain the same, as well as the connections between them. However, there's a 1 in 3 chance that these rooms roll up to their maximum level. So instead of doing 12 incursions over 3 or 4 maps and ending up with 1 Temple Chronicle, you can potentially end up with up to 5. Now since the Scarab of Timelines is the most expensive part of this strategy, there is a bit of nuance around how to best use it. If you go speak to Alva before beginning to build your temple, she will give you a preview of the temple, showing you what rooms are already connected. In the case of this one here, I already have connected up a Gemcutter's Workshop, which is one of my desired rooms. That, alongside the Corruption Chamber, become both the Dorianes Institute and the Locus of Corruption respectively. So if I head over and talk to Alva and I see that one of these rooms is already connected, that's a perfect time to throw a Scarab of Timelines into my first temple. Counter to that, if I were to speak with Alva and I were to see a temple like this one, I might want to exclude my Scarab from the first map, just because the temple doesn't have any guaranteed good rooms, and there's also no guarantee that any good ones will spawn within that first map. In that case, it might be a good idea to just leave the Scarab out and let the temple build itself for a map or two, see if you can get any of those good rooms connected up. Of course, you can apply this methodology to any room in the temple if you have a different desired room, like if you're after some rare items with temple mods, for example. Since you're not guaranteed to get any good rooms upon restarting your temple, you really do want to get as many chronicles out of the Scarab of Timelines as you can before resetting your temple back down to nil. And to that end, I am unspecking the Artifacts of the Vol node, which states that your maps with incursions always have 4. And that does a couple of things for us. If the starting temple is bad, we can more easily use that first map as a buffer to just build and exclude the Scarab so that we're not really fronting any cost for a potentially garbage temple. Alternatively, if there is a good starting room, it will give you 1 extra map to attempt to roll that 1 in 3 to turn it into a tier 3. Before I go any further into what you should do upon entering an incursion, it's important that you understand the difference between a non-resident architect and a resident architect. Resident architects, denoted by this symbol here, are ones that can be killed to change the incursion room. Non-resident architects are denoted by this symbol, a little upgrade arrow. They're invading the existing temple room, in this case the lightning workshop, in order to attempt to change it for themselves. In this particular room, we have the option to kill the existing architect and change the room to the workshop. We don't care about that room. The other option is to upgrade the lightning workshop. That is actually the desired outcome in a room like this, which doesn't have either a gem cutter's workshop or a corruption chamber. And the reason for that is because of the node resource reallocation, which states killing non-resident architects in your maps has a 40% chance to add an additional upgrade tier to the surviving architect's room. The more rooms that you upgrade to tier 3, the more you narrow down the potential number of rooms that it can send you into when you enter an incursion. And the earlier you do this, and the earlier you can find those 2 desired rooms and add them at least level 1 to your temple, the more temple chronicles you will generate from the Scarab of Timelines, and the higher chance you have to actually roll the 1 and 3 to turn those rooms into something sellable. So what does the strategy look like once you actually get into an incursion in a map? Well, if you didn't know, as soon as you enter an incursion, you're given a 10-second grace period before anything will attack you and before the timer starts counting down. You should be using this time to take a look at the layout of the temple and what kind of room you've ended up in. Your priority should be as follows. Check and see if the room that you're in can be changed to either a corruption chamber, a gem cutter's workshop, or a shrine of empowerment. Now, I've already covered why you would want to turn a room into a corruption chamber and a gem cutter's workshop. But why would you want to change a room into a Shrine of Empowerment? Well, the level 1 Shrine of Empowerment upgrades a random connected room by 1 tier. The level 3 Shrine of Empowerment, the Temple Nexus, upgrades all adjacent rooms by 1 tier, regardless of whether they are connected. Now obviously this can be fantastic if you're able to place this next to one of your other desired rooms, especially if you're only able to get one of those rooms up to level 2 throughout your 12 incursions. But if you have even a level 1 Shrine of Empowerment, and it succeeds its 1 and 3, rolling up to a Temple Nexus, it means that any adjacent rooms can roll either a 2 or a 3 to be considered a success, as rolling a 3 is naturally a success, and rolling a 2 will get them upgraded to level 3 via the Temple Nexus. The second thing you should do is focus on connections. At least one rare monster within each incursion will be carrying a Stone of Passage. Once you have this in your inventory, you can click on one of the closed doors in the past in order to make sure that it becomes a temple connection in the present. Now, if you have a desired room that you've just created or one that's spawned unconnected, you should obviously prioritize connecting that up to the entrance so that it can be dropped by the Scarab of Timelines within one of the randomized chronicles. But most of the time, you'll just be worrying about future-proofing the connections in your temple in case you spawn in one of those rooms in the future, and it gives you the option to upgrade to one of the rooms that you want. Once you make sure you've done both of those things, make sure you clean up any magic monsters within the temple, as those contribute pretty heavily to the simulacrum splinters and the delirium rewards that you receive at the end of the map. Let me go over the Atlas tree for this strategy. It requires about 123 points to get going. I'm taking all of the domination nodes that I can get my hands on, none that I need to exclude for this strategy. They all work and are fantastic for either map feel or getting some extra magic monsters to juice up the delirium. I'm pathing through almost all of the incursion nodes. At the very least, I'm taking every one of them that's going to give me chance to include Alva in my maps so that we get up to 100%. Same thing with the delirium nodes, just want to make sure that we have a 100% chance for a delirium mirror to spawn. Like I said earlier, Artifacts of the Vault is being excluded so that we can have that extra chance to generate another temple from the Scarab. Treasure Hunt spawns cursed treasure inside your incursions, which you can click on to sacrifice a portion of your time. It never really seemed to take away too much time that it ended up kicking me out of the incursion, but I also didn't notice that I was getting anything from it. It's hard to say that it's worth it, but you can definitely spec it if that's something that you're into, and that goes double for the Vol Oligarchs node, which causes a Vol Flesh Merchant to appear in the incursions. I didn't really notice a meaningful difference in loot. It just spawns as a unique version of those annoying rare wraiths that go invisible and hide from you for a bunch of time. They also get really tanky later in the delirium. Just didn't seem worth it. Descent into Madness is one of those nodes that, like I discussed earlier, you probably want to exclude if you're running Tropical Island, as the map is quite long, and you'll get to that high delirium point where monsters have insane damage reduction really fast. If you can handle it, you can definitely spec it, and it will give you some extra quantity. But if you are running a shorter map like Beach, you may want to spec it just because you won't have as much actual distance within the map to get to that quantity point as fast as you might like. Another couple nodes that I'm specifically excluding are the pathological node, which causes maps to have a chance to have layers of delirium, and the reason for that is because I'm trying to sustain as much of my own map drop as I possibly can, and if a map drops with layers of delirium, it won't spawn a mirror. I'm also not spec'd into Delusions of Persecution, as I'm not really a bossing build, and I don't have enough single target to reliably and quickly kill the unique bosses that spawn within a delirium. You can absolutely take this, however, if you are. Past that, I'm taking all of the other delirium and incursion nodes, nothing special about any of these. I like going across the bottom path to Paranoid Fixation, as it gives an extra chance to drop delirium orbs rather than cluster jewels, but I did drop a couple of valuable cluster jewels throughout my maps as well. So if that's something you want to do instead, you totally can. It just takes a little bit more game knowledge to know what cluster jewels are going to be worth selling. And finally, I'm finishing it off with Exarch altars. There's nothing super special about Exarch altars. You just really want to have at least one Eldritch Influence for all of the extra monsters that get added to the map to contribute to the Delirium. I'll be including the PoE Planner link for this tree down in the description below. And lastly, I wanted to quickly go over the spreadsheet that I use to track my data. You can find this linked in the description below. You can also find it within the guide archive, which will also be linked below. This is a bit of a repository of all of my strategies. Of course, the ones from last league are a little bit outdated, with some of the changes, removals of scarabs, and the additional map slot device, but they're there if you want them. Anyway, the main thing that I want you to understand about the spreadsheet is these yellow boxes here. Anywhere you see a yellow box is some kind of thing that I anticipate changing. The divine ratio up top, for example, so if you really wanted to, you could change that box to the current exchange rate of divines and see what the current expected returns would be. The same thing is true for the cost of all of these scarabs that you can manually change here, in the exchange rate for all of the returns, the things that you're farming that you're going to sell. Other than that, you can pretty much leave the rest of the stuff in the sheet alone, unless you want to use it to track your own data, in which case you can just make a copy. But it's mostly here for if you're coming to the strategy a little bit later and the prices of these things have changed, for you to be able to tell ahead of time whether or not it's still worth doing. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video or it helped you out in any way, please leave a like, subscribe for more, and consider joining the channel as a member if you'd like to show your support. Also, I'm live almost daily over at ds_gz on Twitch, playing mostly Path of Exile, listening to some music. Come and hang out, it's a good time. As always, I'm GZ, and I'll see you in the next one.